Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. My guest today is a woman that I was introduced to in an original conversation. We just started talking as if we've known each other as fellow New Yorkers for years. And it is my joy and pleasure to actually have her give a little bit of insight and education. Her clients refer to Carol Lempert as a psychiatrist and a cute librarian. Funny thing in the same breath. Carol leverages the stagecraft she owned in her early career as an actress and playwright to help leaders increase their executive presence by teaching them the skills actors use to have great stage presence. She empowers her clients to tell better stories, improve their personal brand, and manage performance anxiety. She's a sought-after leadership development expert, having been quoted in Forbes, Financial Post, Reader's Digest, The New York Times. Clients range from Google and JPMorgan to Harvard Executive Education. And yep, Mom is really proud when she shares that one. Carol, thank you so much for joining me here today.
It's my pleasure. I've really been enjoying your podcast. It's a real treat to be a guest.
So thank you for that. And I have to start, in this experience of we're living during the COVID-19 experience. Mm-hmm. And in looking at this as an experience, there's going to be a lot of shifts, changes, evolutions from the experience of living through COVID-19. In that way, I think, one of your expertise is, as we've chatted previously, is this way that you have transitioned your career. And there's people out there saying they might be ready for a transition. Mm-hmm. They might be ready to say, you know what, I'm not ready to do things the way I did. They might be saying, wow, I see great opportunity there. Am I ready to jump? Let's jump. Can you share a little bit of how you have transitioned and taking crafts that was honed over years and then building it into a business that is not necessarily being an actor or a playwright?
Yeah. So the main advice that I would give to someone who might be considering making a change or because of having lived through COVID is starting to reevaluate the choices that they've made and maybe they want to do things differently, quote unquote, whenever after it technically is to do an inventory on what are the skills that you enjoy and what are the skills that you are good at. Because looking at your skills doesn't necessarily peg you in a particular industry. And that's exactly what happened to me. And in fact, it was my brother that had this insight about what my skills were that I didn't even have about myself, which is another thing that we can share with your listeners is to ask other people who know you well, when they think of you, what do they think of you as, what are you really, really good at? Because sometimes you don't even know that about yourself.
I have to stop you there because I had that same experience.
Oh yeah, tell me.
100 years ago when I was thinking about transitioning and I heard about coaching and people saying, you should become a coach. And I started asking people who knew me. Mm-hmm. I said, I sat across a Starbucks table with somebody who said, oh my God, Ivy, you are a coach. I was like, what does that mean? What do I do? What does it mean? And what do I do with it? So Your brother looked at you and what did he see?
So about 20 some odd years ago, we'll put those numbers out into the ether, I get a phone call from him one day. And at this point, I'm an actress going to auditions, hustling. And in order to pay my rent, I'm working as a temp. Because when I was in the 8th grade, my mother taught me to type. It's the best thing she ever made me learn how to do, that I learned how to type and do keyboarding. So
Touché to moms.
Yes, big hats off to mom. So I get a phone call from my brother, Sheldon, and he's like, sis, get over here. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I jump in the car, drive to his house. There's urgency in his voice. What's going on? How can I help? And when I get there, his best friend, this guy named Lance, is in the washroom, sick as a dog, and he's throwing up. And I'm like, I think maybe we should call 911. I'm not sure why you called me. So I come to find out that Lance, who just graduated college and he's got his first big boy job wearing his big boy, trousers to work. He's been there maybe 4 months. He's been tapped on the shoulder to give a presentation to his boss's boss. He was working, I think, at Price Waterhouse before Cooper's came along. And A, he's an introvert. B, he never took speech class, and he's having a full-on panic attack about what this means for his entire future. He's only been there 3 months. Doesn't know what to do, calls his best friend, my brother, hey man, I need help. My brother, however, works in construction. So my brother's like, I don't know anything about giving a presentation. And this was before we had PowerPoint. This is like you had to create your transparencies and put them on the projector. You know, that was how long ago.
Oh, I remember those days.
Yes. So my brother goes, my sister's an actress. She can help. And that's
so we have a construction worker and an actress who is now going to come in and save the day.
Exactly. And so that's what I meant about other people see things in you that maybe you don't even know about yourself. I would never have thought I can help an accountant give a presentation to his boss's boss just because I know how to go to an audition. My brother had that insight. So when I was there, I'm like, well, I know how to go to an audition. So let's see what you got to do. And I worked with him for about 3 days, and he went off and he did his presentation and he did well. And that was that. 3 months later, I get a phone call from another guy who says, hi, you don't know who I am. I got your name from Lance. Lance said that you really helped him. Can you help me too? And I realized like, oh, this is a thing. So I did some research about this thing, what this thing was. And I took 2 years off my acting career and I went back to school to be certified as an adult educator. And so that's how I made that transition.
So when you learned to be an adult educator, that's great in how you learned how to create the transition. That doesn't give us the skill sets. And it's so true. We go to get certified in so many things. Myself as a coach, you as an adult educator. It doesn't give the skill sets of, okay, now I have this knowledge and I have this certificate on my wall and doesn't it look great? How do you get clients? How did you become a business owner? You've led through this for years. Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit of shifting that perspective.
So that then transitions into, you do an inventory to figure out what are not only what are my skills, what are the skills that I enjoy? I think if someone's thinking to make a transition, let's make a transition to a joyful place. So what are the skills that I enjoy? Let's ask people who know me as well. And as I'm having those conversations, asking people that know me as well, what you're dipping your toe into is starting to do your networking. And it's through the networking that you're going to start to learn about places that have problems that your skills are going to be able to solve. So for me, it's less about, I need a job. Where can I find a job? Let's look at job postings. It's more about having conversations with people in your network or places that they work or people that they serve. Or products that they sell. What are the problems that you have in your business? What are the problems your customers have? Do I have the skill set that I'll be able to help solve some of those problems? So after I got my certification, I was in a program with 20 other people. So that became my new network of people that we were all learning the same thing together, and we were swapping information and contacts. And so the very first position that I got after I graduated that program was at a place called George Brown College in Toronto, Canada, running a program called the Job Finding Club. And the Job Finding Club was a place where people who were just at the end, it's interesting, we're talking about this now. So many people are signing up for unemployment insurance now and will be job seeking soon. At the time, this program in Canada was funded by the federal government. When you were at your last 3 weeks of unemployment insurance, if you had not yet found a position, there was this program that you could go to that you could learn some of the skills. And they're the skills around marketing. How do you write a resume? How do you talk about yourself at an interview? And so my skills as an actor, what an actor does most of the time when they're not actually acting on the stage in a show is go to auditions. And what an audition is a job interview. Right. That's what it is. So when I heard about that particular position at the Job Finding Club, I knew in an instant that I knew how to help other people do that. I knew how to put my skills on a piece of paper. In a theater, you have a particular format for your resume, but you need to have a resume. In the theater, you have some kind of calling card, you have your picture taken, it's an 8x10. Depending on if you're a graphic artist, you have to have your portfolio. Like I just intuitively knew that I would be able to help people figure out how to get jobs because I knew how to go to auditions.
So you started, you got that first gig. Mm-hmm. Where has the business, how has you grown this as a business to pick up clients like Harvard and JPMorgan and And we all start with baby steps, and that first gig is huge.
Yeah.
That first time you get that first audition, and I remember as a dancer, the first time I got that first audition, it's huge. And then it's, how do you scale that? What does that look like? How do you leverage this experience?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because as soon as I had that experience where my brother introduced me to his buddy Lance, and then Lance's buddy called me, I had a sense, like, I know how to stand in front of an audience, therefore I know how to stand in front of participants and students. Like, that was easy for me to envision myself. But I didn't yet think about myself as a businesswoman. I just thought about myself as a speaker and a trainer and a little bit of a coach at the time. And so for years and years, I was white labeled under other training companies delivering their content. And I knew I was good in front of people, but I didn't yet know that I understood about business. And about 3 years ago, maybe, I started, because who I typically work with now are people that work in Fortune 500 companies. So I've had a lot of exposure to senior vice presidents who are working at companies, some C-suite executives that I'm talking about. And I've had a deep exposure to what the business life is like vicariously through my clients who are living the business life. But what I had to consciously envision myself is someone that could own their own business, put my name on, as you do, someone who can put my name on my own business. So I had to learn new skills. I had to learn how to write a proposal. I had to learn how to think about pricing. I had to learn how to negotiate. That's different than going to an audition. So those things didn't come as naturally to me. And since for many, many years, people had hired me to be a coach, and I know you work as a coach, it's important for a coach to have a coach. And so I hired a business coach to help me think about upskilling in all of those places where I had the deficit. And partly it was having the vision of what it would look and feel like to be Carol Lempert Speaking LLC and have my own business. And then what are the skills that I need to push myself to get there? So you ask people for advice, you leverage your network.
And I think that's so important. And I think also to acknowledge, as we learn and grow and we take on the ability, or we take on the adventure, I'll put it that way, of putting ourselves out there to learn new things. When I transitioned from being a printer, it was very clear how I priced myself. It was a formulaic approach. How much does paper cost? How many cylinder, right? We had a formulaic approach in pricing and an overhead factor, etc. In a service-based industry, there's a lot of mindset around how do you price your services? How do you price based on results? But I want to say kudos to you, because what you've done is you stepped into the unknown, and what is unknown is uncomfortable.
That's right.
And I think what we're seeing out now presently in the business world is unknown. Are we working in offices today? Who knows? Are we working virtually today? Who knows? What are businesses looking like? A lot of businesses are evolving from this COVID-19 experience. So it's kudos to you for reaching out for the ask and getting the support to gain the knowledge. And also being willing to live in an unknown to grow.
Thank you. Yeah. And as things grow or shrink and then grow again or grow in different directions. So for example, before the crisis hit, I had 3 speaking gigs a month lined up from now till the end of the year. And they were going to be big groups of people, 70 people each. I was going to be teaching around my storytelling and around my personal branding. And many of the clients, rightfully so, put all of that work on hold, and not knowing when it was going to feel comfortable for people to gather in groups again. And so then the question is, how can you still solve the problems that your clients have? Clients still have the problem of figuring out how to be powerful leaders, even more so now when they're having to manage remotely. How can I help solve that problem when I myself am also remote? So it's leaning into the discomfort of, wow, I've never really done a virtual keynote. What might that look and feel like? Could that be something that might be helpful for my clients? And I think the whole world in the last several months have been asking themselves that question. One of my clients is a life science company. So they've been really, really busy helping figure out how to find a test, what would be the steps of the test be, And so they have to do now virtual demonstrations of their own equipment to the laboratories that might buy the equipment, the labs that are doing the research. None of those field operation people have ever done a virtual demo on the equipment that the client can't touch at the same time that they're demonstrating it. So we're all leaning into this place of, I've never done it before. I guess it can be doable. Let's figure it out.
And, also in sharing this, it's so important to listen to what the environment, what the clients need in this time. And you just, in that same way, and I think this is the greatest skill set entrepreneurship brings to the business world, is the listening to what are the problems, what are the needs of the communities out there and the clients out there, and how do we serve them? And you immediately launched in, and you've produced a quick course to reach the needs of the clients, reach the needs of the people out there in your network, and help people.
Yeah. And my husband, I'll talk about that course in a minute, but it triggered something. My husband is a master improv teacher. He teaches improvisation in Manhattan. And within 3 days of when it became clear what was happening, and, the governors were telling everyone, please stay home and be safe and save lives. My husband's community is the acting community in Manhattan, which are a lot of young people who have moved to New York from Tennessee, from Pittsburgh, from California, from all over the country to come to, try to get on Broadway. That's the dream. That's the vision. So they're here alone. They don't have a lot of money. They're being cut off from their community where they make art together. And that is a recipe for not only financial worry, but mental health issues as well. So he immediately said, I got to figure out how to teach improvisation online. And that night he sent it out to Facebook. Anybody who wants to, 7:00 tonight, show up and, we'll figure something out together. And at the end of that class, it was a 2-hour session. He had about, I think, 12, 14 people join him that very first night. He's been teaching every single night since then, for the last, people are craving community. And in his world, creative people are craving a place to continue to be creative. And if we're going to be in a Zoom room instead of in a real room, we still can be with each other and be together to be creative. But on that first night, nobody knew how to turn on their microphone. And is the camera on? Is the camera not on? He's trying to give instructions about how to do the improv exercise, but usually it's an improv exercise where you touch the other person. And obviously you can't touch the other person. You're sitting in some people were sitting in their bathroom. It was the only, quiet place in the whole apartment, where they could be. But he knew he had to do something. And now here we are months later where he's continuing to do it. And it's the design thinking process. You don't have to have the whole thing baked to start. You just need to start. And then it's an iterative process. The next week, he figured out that he has to give more thorough instructions at the beginning of the session so people get more comfortable with the technology. And the week after that, he thought through what are the better improvisation exercises that are more verbally based rather than physical based. And so week by week by week, you experiment, you learn, you do the next one, you experiment, you learn, you do the next one. And that is entrepreneurial thinking in a nutshell. It doesn't have to be baked. You just have to get started.
1,000%. When this just started, I started putting on calls called How to Be a Visionary Leader in Unexpected Times. And people were like, so is there a subject matter? I was like, I don't know.
Right.
I was like, here's the time, show up. Let's figure this out.
That's
All
right.
I know is there's going to be a lot of businesses that continue, a lot of people who stay in business by showing up with business leadership, right? In the desire of, let's band together. This isn't just networking and we talk about who we are and how we refer. This is how are we building businesses? What innovative ideas you're seeing out there? And I just put it out. That like within 2-3 days, I put a video up and I said, join me. Yeah. And in that way, people started showing up, and then we created, based on listening, great skill in improv and great skill in what you do as well, Carol, is by listening to the pulse of the conversation, we were then able to develop, and we have themes each week about talking business and intentions and accountability. So it's keeping people in action. Here's the deal about entrepreneurship. We could either show up 100% of the time and meet everybody in our networks, in our marketplaces where they are. We could bury our head in the sand like an ostrich and say, wake us up
Right.
when it's over.
Yeah.
And what do we have?
Yeah. The other thing that I hear that you have a kind of a natural knack for, a natural instinct for, you call it networking. And I think it from a professional perspective, it is networking. But what I hear that you did and what my husband had an instinct to do and what I started to do as well, it's about building community. So the people that answered the call of the video that you put out there were the people that are part of your community and were craving community with other like-minded people. So in my husband's world, it's the improv people. In your world, it's the coaches and the business people. In my world, it's the leadership people. So it's coming together as a community. And I think that psychologically that a lot of people don't like, oh, I don't like networking. I don't like going to networking events. I don't like talking about myself. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about exactly what you did. You made a space for community to gather. When community gathers, they have synergies and they build momentum and you get ideas. And then, as you say, you have action. You're moving forward together.
Yeah. We created community to talk business. And what I loved about your course, when you shared that with me, is you created a place because people, immediate response to something like this is a fear-based response.
That's right.
And some people stay in fear and some people acknowledge it and then show up to move through it.
Mm-hmm. What I realize, I'm sorry, please.
No, ahead. I wanted to hear how you approached your, again, immediate development on creating something to help.
So my goal always is to create something that can be helpful. And before the crisis hit, that typically was, how can I teach salespeople to tell better stories? How can I teach leaders to show up more authentically with their executive presence? How can I teach high potential employees to give better presentations like, this fellow Lance that I told you about? And once the crisis hit, all of those things are still important from a business perspective, but they weren't, as a doctor would say, what's the presenting symptom? They weren't the presenting symptom. It's not so important to tell a big story at this moment in time as everybody's dealing with all this uncertainty and anxiety. So the insight that I had is that whatever your home environment is that you are working from home or sheltering in place, there are people who are all by themselves, single people with no spouse or partner or children, and they're alone. And then there are people like my brother, Sheldon, who I was talking about earlier. He's got 6 kids. He's got a house full of 8 people and 3 cats and a goanna, he's got a house full of people. And whatever that is your human contact, or maybe not contact at all if you're living alone. So who else are you going to have an opportunity to talk about what your worries and fears and anxieties are, if some of your worries and fears and anxieties are about the people that you're at home with, that you're stuck at home with? So that was the insight that I had. And the course that I put together is called Less Worry, More Control. How can we focus on the things that we can control to manage our level of worry and anxiety? So it really was a community of like-minded professionals to come together to have a safe place to process their anxiety. And one of the methodologies that I introduced as a way to get that looping thinking out of your head is journaling. So the homework assignments that people had were 15 minutes of daily journaling. And you don't read it, you just write 15 minutes, what I call unconscious writing. The pen hits the page and you just move the pen across the page. And if you don't know what to write, then you keep writing, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. I can't believe Carol gave me this assignment. This is the stupidest thing ever. And eventually something will come and you'll start writing. And then, so for the first week, you do that every day for 15 minutes. And then the second week, you go back and look at what you wrote over the last 7 days. And then you start to get a pulse on what are the themes that keep presenting themselves over and over, and what are the things that literally you've written out and you've kind of burned the energy out of them and they're not on your mind anymore. And that can help replenish your ability to focus and really fortify your feeling of control. Plus, you have other people to talk about, and then I taught some cognitive behavioral therapy concepts as well.
I love it. I love it because you have this beautiful spirit and this beautiful knack as a business leader to listen and take action.
Well, thank you. That's a lovely compliment. I appreciate that.
And, I appreciate you saying thank you. And people who truly know me and listeners who've been with us for a long time and the new listeners, well, welcome and hear this. I might seem nice, but I'm pretty just upfront and I speak my mind and I don't say just pleasantries. I speak what I say and I feel. And I think it's important, and I think it's important for the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow to understand the importance of listening to the pulse of what is going on, and then creating the avenues of how to help people and creating that win-win in business long-term by doing that.
Yeah. And I think that all comes, so we started this whole conversation with the concept of what are the skills that you're good at that you enjoy. And so because I am an actress, and I was drawn to be an actress, and I'm, whether I'm acting or not, I'm an actress, it's in my blood. At the core of being an actress is the skill of being able to take another person's perspective, because you're going to play a different person on stage than you are in life. So you have to literally step into the shoes of that person and that human being. And so that's empathy. And I think that in all industries, as leaders, as salespeople, if you're able to step into the perspective of your customer, the perspective of your boss, the perspective of your colleague, this is perspective of someone on your team, and think to yourself, what is life like if I was that person? Then you're closer to being able to identify what are the problems that person is having. Then you're much closer to identifying, how can I help? And I think no matter what you're doing for a living, whatever your product or service is that you're selling, basically, how can I help? That's what you're trying to do, is help the other person. That's why they would invest in buying your product, buying your service, inviting you into their home, inviting you into their brain. You and I do work where people have to invite us into their brain, right? How can I help?
Exactly. I love it. And I think that truly touches on. So one of the most important pieces of sales of that we come to be of service.
That's right.
It's not about the product. It's not about, for the years that I sold a product, first the years I sold a service, I showed up in the same way of, even when it was a product, it wasn't about the printing product. It was about how we could be of service to make our clients look great to their teams, their bosses. I
remember you told me when we very first spoke, when you started stepping into that role of, okay, I'm in printing now, I'm going to have these business development meetings with potential clients, that you showed up with no samples, and people would be like, Ivy, where's your samples? And you're like, so I'll let you give.
Okay. So I share this story when I actually train in sales, because I was like, why would I bring you samples if I don't know what type of work you produce and how I can help? I could be showing you samples that are so irrelevant, and that I wouldn't then be able to listen and hear whether we're a right partnership for one another or not.
Yes.
And then and they would look at me a little sideways, and it gave me the ability of share, can you share a little bit with me about what you produce annually? Can you share a little bit with me what jobs have gone well and what jobs really have not gone well? Because if we work together, I want to be the vendor that makes you look good to your bosses. And I want our jobs to go well. And I could share a little bit of how we service our client and what our methodology is.
Yep.
And then our samples became irrelevant, because it was about, so if we send a messenger over, you're going to get a call that a messenger's on its way, so it doesn't sit in the mailroom for half a day. Oh, really? It became a service within the product, and as a bonus to the product.
And that, to me, that story is a beautiful example of what it means to think about whether you're selling at that moment in your life, you were selling printing services and paper that people could touch. And now both of us are in the business of intellectual capital. You're in the business of strategy. I'm much more in the business of performance, but still coaching people to get better. But that is an example of what it's like to show up being of service. And I'm so
Carol,
impressed with that.
Share with our listeners today, how can they find out more about who you are, what you're up to, and reach out to you and connect to you, because you are a woman with an enormous amount of knowledge, and as well as anything, a big heart.
Yes, thank you. So I have a website, which people are in this day and age might not be surprised to hear. It's my name, Carol Lempert. That's CarolLem, like lemon, P like Peter, ERT.com, CarolLempert.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well, same name. I'm on Twitter as well, at Carol Lempert. And I have a Facebook page for my speaking business, which is Carol Lempert Speaking. So any of those places virtually, you can check me out and send me an email, send me a direct message. I'm always happy to hop on a call for 15 minutes and just hear what people are pondering and if I might be able to support them.
Fabulous. And listeners know all this information is in the show notes below. If you're actually are commuting versus doing the laundry or making dinner or multitasking as you're doing your admin work and listening to her success story, you could just pop into the show notes and all the information is below. Thank you for joining us here today, Carol. It is a pleasure.
It was my pleasure too. Thank you, Ivy.
And listeners, remember, please, in the notes below, leave us a little comment what your biggest takeaway was from today's information, from Carol's brilliance, what actions you're going to be taking from that, as well as hit subscribe, and we're in your inbox with more great insight and information every Monday morning. Thank you for joining us here. See you next time at Her Success Story.